Friday the 13th, Church of the Divine Psychopath, an original novel by Scott Phillips. Prologue. At the bottom of the lake, the corpse, anchored to the sediment on the lake bed by several concrete blocks, twirled slowly in the current. The ropes that bound the body were waterlogged and fraying, and one dead arm had come free, drifting upwards to point limply towards the surface and the sunlight. Up above, a slight breeze urged a procession of gentle ripples across the surface of the lake, rolling ceaselessly towards the shore. A few birds spun overhead in easy circles. A squirrel scurried along the water's edge, ducking in and out of the grass. From somewhere, muffled voices could be heard. It was a warm spring day at Crystal Lake, and the mutilated corpses of his previous victims had long since been cleaned away. Beneath the lake, the murderer rested, suspended in gloomy silence, eyes closed behind the battered hockey mask that obscured his dead face. Occasionally, a hungry fish would dart in to pick at the decomposing flesh, tearing away a meaty morsel, and every minute of every day, the ropes that held him there rotted a little, becoming more and more frail, loosening their hold on the corpse. Every minute of every day, he slipped from their grasp a bit more, inching towards the surface of the lake. How long had it been since the corpse of Jason Voorhees had been delivered back into the cold waters of Crystal Lake? Weeks? Years? Could the time be measured in butchered bodies and the spilling of blood? Voorhees' final victims had been just as foolish as those who died before them. They had heard the stories, of course. They knew why the place was called Camp Blood. But like so many others, they hadn't believed the tales or had thought that it could happen to them. The teenage girl had died first, died shrieking in terror, her breast jiggling as the air was expelled from her lungs. Jason Voorhees had held her slender wrists clasped tightly in one huge hand, yanking her from the collapsed tent and hoisting her upwards until her bare feet left the ground. Her agonizing screams rose in pitch, accompanied by a loud popping sound, as her left arm was dislocated from the shoulder and wrenched from the socket. Movement nearby caught Jason's attention. The boy was getting away, scrabbling backwards from the ruined tent and staring open-mouthed at his nude girlfriend, who thrashed back and forth like a rag doll in Jason's grasp. The boy was also buck naked, but he hadn't thought about reaching for his clothes when a machete blade ripped and slashed through the nylon wall of their tent. Too bad. He'd been tearing off one fine piece of ass before the psycho killer had interrupted his good times. As he scrabbled backwards, the rocks and sand beneath him scraping the exposed flesh of his ass, he couldn't help but wish he had listened to his friends. Stay away from Camp Blood. The machete entered the girl's torso just above her left hip, glancing off the glistening bone and sinking deeply into the soft flesh of her belly. She gasped, painfully, as the tip of the blade punched through her back. She could feel her blood running down her thighs in thick, warm ribbons. Then Jason savagely worked the machete blade upwards, past her navel, the brutal slicing motion coming to a stop as the edge of the blade sawed into her rib. Something was oozing out of the gaping wound. Before she died, the girl glanced down to see her steaming intestines spilling from the gash in her belly, sliding along in the blood to become entangled in her frantically kicking legs. Jason Voorhees stared at the dying girl without emotion as her life stuttered and twitched to an unpleasant end. Whipping the corpse around like a child's toy, the killer looked past her, watching the teenage boy as he stumbled to his feet and began to run towards the lake. Effortlessly, Jason hurled the lifeless body of the girl into the bushes and gave chase, purposefully striding after the terrified teenage boy. The boy let out an awkward girlish squeal when he realized Jason was pursuing him, hunting him. Foolishly, he splashed out into the water as if he could find safety and refuge from the maniac. He yelped as he stepped on something sharp, then lost his balance and fell face first into the lake. An instant later, he burst from the water, choking and gasping. He whirled back towards the shore, which was empty. Jason Voorhees was nowhere to be seen. With spit dribbling down his chin, the frightened teenage boy stood trembling in the freezing water, staring wide-eyed at the shoreline. The guy was huge. No way could he have disappeared so fast. Splashing, the boy spun to his left, nothing. Back to the right. Still nothing. The moon was nearly full, casting a soft light over the scene. He should have been able to see him. The boy tried very, very hard to quell his shivering, not making a sound as he listened intently for some sign that the killer was still out there. After a moment, he slowly began wading back towards dry land, not letting himself blink, eyes flickering back and forth, as vigilant as someone who's had way too much to drink and then watched their girlfriend get sliced open like a strung-up hog could possibly be. Stepping out of the water, he paused, demurely holding his hands in front of his groin. Still, no sign of Jason. Maybe the killer had got what he wanted with the girl's death. Maybe. Maybe not. Nervously, the boy walked back towards the demolition tent, carefully picking his way across the rocky shoreline. He noticed his foot was bleeding, probably from whatever he stepped on in the lake. Gonna need a tetanus shot for that. As he neared the tent, he saw the snarl of entrails sprayed out across the shredded nylon and the expensive sleeping bags. Blood was everywhere. The boy's lower lip trembled as his eyes traced the trail of guts off into the underbrush, where Jason had flung the girl's corpse. He forced himself to move, gingerly following the ribbons of intestine. Her dead eyes stared up at him, blood poiling in one of the sockets. She didn't look so goddamn sexy anymore. Not like she had at the Kitty concert where they'd met. Not like she had only moments earlier when enjoying frantic, sweaty sex. He realized that he was still wearing the condom. Gasping in dismay, he yanked it free and threw it into the bushes. Then a hand clamped tightly around his neck. Thick fingers sunk into the boy's throat, compressing his windpipe. His feet left the ground as Jason lifted him upwards. The boy struggled to twist his head to get a glimpse of the killer, but the grip on his neck was too strong. Jason swung the machete with inhuman force. The blade sank into the boy's right side, just under the rib cage, and went clean through his spine. The lower half of his body, legs still kicking, swung away from the upper half as organs and more fleshly body parts spilled out onto the ground. Jason dropped the lifeless body atop the girls in a sick parody of the position they'd been in when he'd caught them. Turning, the masked murderer stared at the lantern lights burning in the distance at the old campground. There were others, but like so many times before it had ended abruptly. Like so many times before, someone had tricked Jason, been faster than him, and he had been killed, and his body sent back to the lake. Like so many times before, the body was never recovered. They'd missed it somehow, even with all their searching, and the ropes that held him were rotting. Animated by the current of the lake, the body of Jason Voorhees continued to turn in lazy circles, each rotation of the corpse causing the ropes to fray a little more. Above, a shadowy figure appeared, its image distorted by the motion of the waves. The surface of the water stirred. Chapter 1. Kelly Mills steered her battered Honda Civic into the strip mall's parking lot. The car groaned uncomfortably at the use of the brake pedal. Don't die, she pleaded. Wrenching the wheel, she guided it into a parking space where it lurched to a halt, snapping her head forward. Something hissed beneath the hood, and the car shuddered violently as the engine finally gave up. Still holding the steering wheel, she looked at the recently washed new model SUV parked next to her. Her distorted reflection gazed back from the glistening chrome trim that ran the length of the vehicle. She sighed longingly. The Honda she was driving was older than she was. Her mother had squeezed a couple of 100,000 miles out of the 1980 Civic before bestowing upon Kelly. Now it just felt like one more manifestation of the disdain her mother had for her. Maybe the mean old bitch was right. Why should someone like Kelly deserve anything nice, anyway? Better things to think about, Kelly thought. She cocked the mirror towards herself and checked out the reflection. Not bad. Not bad at all. Just the right amount of eyeliner to bring out the flecks of gold in her green eyes. She had never believed in the rule that said dark eyeliner and dark lipstick don't play well together. But this time she had skipped the bruise-colored lipstick she loved so much and had gone for a subtle pinkish number. For a moment she considered pulling her brown hair into a prim little ponytail. Don't want to look too sexy for church, after all. But then she thought about Father Long. Man of God he may be, but Kelly had seen the cute little gleam in his eye when he looked her way. Kelly laughed out loud. What would her mama say if she knew that after the parade of delinquents she dated in high school? Hell, let's be honest, she was still dating them. Kelly had her sights set on a preacher man. one in his 40s at that. She tried to tell herself that it wasn't sinful, then adjusted her blouse to reveal the tiniest hint of cleavage and got out of the car. As she stood, she realized the blouse didn't quite reach the top of her slacks. Despite considerable tugging, she wasn't exactly used to shopping for Sunday go-to-meeting clothing, and she had an undefeatable enthusiasm for low-slung pants. Maybe I'll shave my pubic hair into a little cross, she thought. Then she could ask Father Long to kneel and worship at its foot. Good bread, good meat, good God, let's eat. Kelly winced at the impolite but admittedly not unpleasant idea. Horrible. I'm completely horrible, she thought. Shaking her head, she started for the building, trying to remember not to put too much sway into her hips. The Ministry of the Heavenly Vessel occupied a small storefront in the strip mall, its interior hidden behind faded flower print curtains. Only one can mete out judgment, promised the hand-painted cardboard sign that sat in the window. Hundreds of dead flies littered the sill from end to end, piled a half-inch high in places. Kelly paused at the door, staring at the dead flies. Suddenly another one dropped from above, lending its corpse to the heap. The pesky insects always seemed to come here to the front of the building to die. The elephant's graveyard, in miniature. Bracing herself, she sucked in a deep breath, held it, and opened the door. A wave of hot air spilled out, thick with the stench of body odor and cheap perfume. The church couldn't afford air conditioning, and there were a lot of folks crammed into the small space. A good 35 or 40 God-fearing stink producers of every age, size, and shape. The old people seemed to put off the worst reek, a sour, stinging smell like rotted meat soaked in vinegar. Under the bouquet of drenched underarms and sweaty thighs, Kelly could pick up the faint aroma of cookies or cake, baked by one of the churchgoers. She'd never had the stomach to eat any of the stuff, however. The congregation was settling into their seats when Kelly entered. The stink seemed worse tonight somehow. Something new had been added to the usual mix of odors. She returned a number of smiles and waves as she took her own seat near the front, a metal folding chair that always put her right butt cheek to sleep. The murmured pieces of conversation that Kelly could hear died away as Father Eric Long stepped out from behind a partition at the front of the room. Curtis Rickle at his side as always. Rickles made Kelly feel uncomfortable, though. She wasn't quite sure why. He was always friendly to her, even if his eyes were constantly flicking to her breast during their short conversations. She certainly couldn't hold that particular sin against a fellow, though. A former Marine, Rickles had lost all of his upper front teeth and most of his left foot. Not in combat, mind you, but in some sort of accident. He got around pretty good on what was left of his damaged hoof, but had a bad habit of popping his dentures out at unexpected moments. Kelly often wondered how the accident, whatever it may have been, had managed to tear him up at the top and the bottom, but nowhere in between. Besides, he seemed a little skinny to be a Marine. Now, on the other hand, she turned her attention to Father Long. The folksy preacher man was standing with hands in pockets, gazing out across the faces of his followers, a tiny, mysterious smile on his face. Not the best looking of men, but there was something about him Kelly couldn't put her finger on, although she was certainly willing to put more than that on him, given the opportunity. Maybe he was just rugged? And she wasn't sure she'd ever known anyone with charisma like his before. But if the stuff existed, Long had plenty of it. The man stirred all sorts of bizarre notions in her, and at the moment, what she really wanted was to settle down on Walton's Mountain with the guy, have a load of filthy sex, and start pupping out John Boy and the gang. Then have some more sex. Kelly wriggled in her seat. Her ass was already falling asleep, but the endless parade of Father Long ass-slapping fantasies dancing through her noggin were also creating a damp patch in her panties. It wasn't like she just wanted to fuck the guy. She respected him. She reflected on all the assholes she dated in the past. Of course I'll call you. Are you kidding? You're the only one for me. She really did respect Father Long. He'd sure as hell be the only guy she'd ever get it on with who could be trusted. Why hadn't she thought of it before? There was just that little matter of getting the preacher to put out. Oh my God, Kelly suddenly thought. Will I have to marry him first? There had to be a way to get him to agree to a test drive. She was disappointed when Long turned and strode to the church's makeshift altar without acknowledging her. Rickles took up his usual position nearby, arms folded across his chest, Jarhead as altar boy. As Long placed his hands on the podium and leaned forward to look upon the faces before him once more, his eyes finally fell on Kelly. There was that gleam again. A ripple of schoolgirl giddiness squirmed through her body. "Hot in here, isn't it?" Long began. "You ain't just whistling Dixie," Kelly wanted to say as she superstitiously squeezed her thighs together. A few members of the congregation chuckled as Long pulled a handkerchief from his back pocket and wiped his brow. Kelly imagined him tossing the damp handkerchief to the crowd, Elvis style. What would she have to do to score a backstage pass? "We won't have to worry about this heat much longer." The preacher replaced the handkerchief and leaned forward on the podium again, smiling. "We have a new home." The room erupted in applause, snapping Kelly out of her long-induced reverie. Embarrassed, she awkwardly began clapping along. Smiling humbly, Long gestured for silence. "I know you've all been looking forward to it, and I finally signed the papers to lease the land." There was another smattering of applause. "We leave before the week is out." This time, Long's words brought whistles and cheers, as well as hand-clapping. It was what Kelly loved about the ministry and Long. He brought all these people together, made them feel like they were part of something special, made her feel special. This time, Long let the applause play out, shooting a playful shrug at Rickles. When the hubbub finally died down, a solemn expression came over Long. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I know that having faith can sometimes be a burden. Your friends, sometimes even your family, can make you feel like there's something wrong with you for believing so strongly." Long locked eyes with Kelly. She gasped audibly, then looked away, reddening. She was 26 years old. She shouldn't be such a giddy teenager. "What happens to a prophet in this day and age?" Long continued, louder now. "We all know. We all watch the news. A prophet is shunned, ridiculed, maybe even killed for what he believes, what he gives voice to." Long stepped back from the podium, giving a slight nod to Rickles. Rickles, in turn, gestured to two other men, who left their seats and joined the ex-Marine. The three disappeared behind the partition. Pulling his handkerchief out again, Long mopped the sweat from his face. "I'm not talking about myself. I wouldn't be so bold. Look at your neighbor, the good person sitting next to you. That person is the prophet. We're all of us the prophet. And those who ridicule and deny..." Long took a deep breath, exhaling slowly. "I'm sad for them, truly sad." As if on cue, Rickles reappeared, shoving the partition aside. Behind it, the other two men stood on either side of a sheet spread across a bulky form laid out on the floor. Kelly craned her neck, trying to get a better look. A smile spread across Long's face. "Sad for them," he said, turning to face his flock again, "because they are so unprepared in the eyes of God." With that, Rickles and the other men bent to take hold of whatever was beneath the sheet. Rickles at the top, the two men on either side. Struggling under its weight, they wrestled the thing into an upright position next to the altar, scraping the ceiling in the process. Kelly was reminded of the photo of the Marines raising the flag on Iwo Jima. Long moved to stand next to the covered object. Kelly suddenly felt uneasy. Something about Long's smile had changed almost imperceptibly. With a grandiose gesture, Long yanked the sheet away. A collective gasp rose from the congregation. Kelly felt ready to spew as she stared in horror at the source of this new sickening stench. Long spread his arms before the massive wooden cross and the figure bound to it. "I feel sad for them because the hand of judgment, the heavenly vessel, will soon be resurrected, and they will know that they have sinned." Upon the cross, lashed tightly to the thick beams with heavy rope, hung the lifeless body of Jason Voorhees. A single maggot wriggled from the right eye hole of his battered hockey mask. Kelly watched it squirm until it dropped to the floor, out of sight. This has been the prologue and the first chapter of Friday the 13th, Church of the Divine Psychopath, narrated by me, LaRue EXE. I'm hoping that there's a demand for this, as this book series was canceled shortly after being released back in 2005 and 2006. To buy these books online right now, you have to pay outrageous prices. And I have the collection of the Friday the 13th books by Black Flame, the Jason X books by Black Flame, and the Nightmare on Elm Street book series as well. And my idea is to share these with everyone a couple chapters at a time, every day or so. I will want to see if there's a demand for it. I hope that the people that really want to read these books but can't afford to buy them for the outrageous prices online will enjoy being able to listen to this audio rendition of the book. Let me know in the comments what you think. Give me a like. Go ahead and subscribe. Hit that bell. I'll be adding chapters very regularly. Thank you for listening.